Yeah, no, I love I love Dave Chappelle. I actually got to see him do stand up way back, like just before the third season of Chappelle Show that never came out was supposed to come out. But yeah, no, I talk in the book, right? There's the first chapter is about comedy, and then it kind of goes into a broader set of topics as it goes on. But that first chapter is kind of about sort of what's going on when people, like morally, politically critique, like decontextualized jokes from stand-up sets as if these were like statements from people running for the National Political Committee of DSA or something. And why we do that, and what's going on there, and I think that what it says about the sort of weird relationship that American progressives have to comedy, and so I talk about a lot of things like that bizarre like March to Restore Sanity that Jon Stewart did, which I think is sort of the flip side of all of that, right? That like people are willing to like march on Washington because
because a comedian told them to.
Exactly. Was the transracialism joke.
Yeah.
But like even there, I feel like it's like there's a difference between the way you'd explore a topic in a stand-up set and the way you'd explore it in an essay, right? Like it's not.
Yes.
He's not arguing for a conclusion. He's exploring like some ambiguities around like a hot button issue, for like comedy. That just seems like a lot of the reaction to that just really didn't seem to get that distinction.
To hear the rest of this show and more, go to.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and happy Tuesday. I'd like to introduce my co-host, my homie, my dog, Mr. Pascal Robert. How are you?
Peace and greetings, Brother Jason Miles. Peace and greetings to the chat and to the audience.
I just, I jumped right in. I didn't even play the Tuesday theme song. So I apologize. So I said I was going to do it and fucking forgot to do it. So my bad. It's this shirt. I'm trying to channel my inner Pascal Islandness in this shirt.
I hear you. with the Mao Zedong hat, right?
With the so that was a clip from the first time I was able to get Ben Burgis on the show. I still am a fledgling podcaster. And because of getting Ben on the show, I was able to get Doug Lane on the show. And Doug Lane and Zero Books has helped this show grow tremendously. So I will always be in Ben's good graces since he helped us out, helped the show out. And we actually had a very fun conversation that first show. I believe that's episode 50 or 49. So if you go back in the Wayback Machine, you can check that one out from last year. So without any further ado, let's bring on. He is a professor of logic. He's an author now of 2 books. He's the host of a very successful podcast, Give Them an Argument. Coming at us all the way live from Michigan, somewhere in Michigan. You don't even know where because it's so secret. Ben Burgis.
Hey, Jason.
What's up, man?
Yeah. East Lansing right now. I'll solve that mystery.
Okay. Well,
East
I didn't
Lansing, Michigan.
I didn't know if it was a secret. Like, man, I can't have these people know where I lived, and they come knocking on my door. Tired of signing all these autographs, all 7.
Yeah. It's actually funny because over the weekend I was visiting my little brother in Los Angeles. It was the first time I got on a plane since the pandemic started, and we're sitting like outside, having coffee, and somebody actually did stop by and like say hi because he like knew me from the show or whatever, and like I have to say, with Love, this was so funny because it was like the platonic ideal of somebody who'd watched GTA. They were it was this like kind of like unshaven dude in like this
were you in Silver Lake? Is that what your brother's at? Where
Yeah,
part of LA were you? Were you?
yeah, no, literally is in Silver Lake, unshaven dude, said he just like finished a grad program in philosophy. He was there with his girlfriend who was like way too hot to be dating that guy, and he's wearing a Sopranos t-shirt. I was like, okay, this is the
It's your people, man.
yeah, that's the demo, right? I mean, that's got to be it.
Did it make you feel like, and this, we're going to get into the book in a little bit, but did it make you feel like, first of all, you got on a plane, you're a better man than myself. I'm still a little shook to do that. And I'm vaccinated. Did it make you feel like you wanted to do live shows or at least book signings after that happened? Like, oh man, I really want to go out and start doing my thing again.
Yeah, I mean, I do actually really want to go start doing all that. I mean, it's a little tricky since stuff is only, starting to open up, and I don't, I know that like people haven't certainly got into the hope that guy doesn't feel insulted, by the way, because like almost everything I just said about him could be said about me, right? I'm not saying I recognize, I recognize one of me in the wild, but yeah, like I think people obviously haven't really got into the habit of doing this stuff again, so I'm not sure just how quickly it's realistic to start doing all that again, but I really do, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is I mean, like talking into a computer is great and all, but like actually like talking to people who are physically there with you has a lot of appeal to me right now.
Entirely different thing. It's an entirely different energy. I'm definitely wanting to do stuff live again. What to do live, I don't know. Actually, one of my band members hit me up recently. I was like, hey, I'm vaccinated. You guys want to fucking at least jam or something? Because he's actually playing shows, and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable going out in the world right now, man. I just don't trust people. That's me personally. What about you, Pascal?
I'm still hesitant, but when the opportunity arises, I think we should all try to make that move. When I get this book out, and we go to sign autographs and all that good stuff.
Nice. Do you have any idea what the timeline is for that?
I'm hoping maybe by next February.
Okay.
It's at a turtle's pace, Burgess. A turtle's pace with Robert.
Hey, babe, Ben, you got 2 books out, so you know the concept.
Yeah, no, it takes a while. Like it was I mean, I had people who were like sort of mad at me because I'd like spent so much time talking about this book before it came out. I was like, guys, I don't think you know how this works.
that clip that you guys heard is about a year, almost to the day old. And he had just finished the book, and you didn't cover for it anything. I think the title was a working title, or was that the done title at that point?
I mean, the title I guess was done, but it was I think I just finished like a draft, and then then it takes a while to revise it, and then it takes a while for them to come back at you with copy edits, and like the actual like everything was completely signed off on. Like the copy edits, the blurbs for the cover and all that stuff in like July, like early July. And then the standard, like sometimes you can get them to speed it up a little bit if you have a really good excuse, but I didn't have anything that I could sell them on for that. The standard, like after all the T's have been crossed and all the I's have been dotted, the standard 0 books publishing schedule, it's several more months after that.
Someone says, show the merch, Ben. Sue Nyman says, show the merch, Ben. You have merch now?
No, I don't have merch.
Oh, okay. Forrest was giving me shit though, because when you guys got your Facebook page was the same day I got merchandise. And Forrest goes, God damn, man, we're over here trying to get Facebook pages, and Jason Miles over here got merchandise.
Yeah. Making us look bad. Yeah, no, we should. We should have some merch. I don't know what that would look like, but we should figure something out.
Oh, I'm sure Andrew could draw you something.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, actually, knowing Andy, he's probably, like, since we've been talking about merch for a solid 45 seconds, like he's probably already checked out some preliminary designs, and like he's probably sending me Facebook messages right now. Like, it's like, okay, so the T-shirt, is this what it should look like?
And shout out to our moderator, John Ross, who says hello to you, Brother Ben Burgis.
John?
Now, I also I had made a little intro video for what we're going to talk about today for the new book. That clip that we did was you kind of telling me a little bit about what the new book was going to be about.
Yeah.
But I read it. Pascal read it. And I made a little video for it. So before we start drilling you with questions, and yelling at you for yelling at the left, check this clip out real quick.
One of their political weapons is cancel culture, driving people from their jobs, shaming dissenters, and demanding total submission from anyone who disagrees. This is the very definition of totalitarianism. And it is completely alien to our culture and to our values, and it has absolutely no place in the United States of America.
Cancel culture and the culture wars in general are obstructing the ability to produce a political project that addresses the material needs of poor and working class Americans in the current age of constricting capitalism. Professor Ben Burgis, in his new book, Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, attempts to chart a way out of this morass by offering a critique of the contemporary left that illustrates the internal obstacles that make expanding its political reach difficult. On this episode of This is Revolution, we will ask Ben Burgis, can the left save itself from itself? This is Revolution.
I just want you to know also, too, when you look up images for cancel culture, it's just right-wing propaganda.
No, I mean, of course it is, which because that's the cycle of this, right? I mean, that's the culture war cycle that, like, people, for a variety of reasons, I think we could talk about neoliberal social atomization and the fact that so many people feel most connected to others online. Could talk about the like for-profit social media companies that are, you know, like that have feedback loops that encourage our most destructive behavior. We could talk about the fact that people feel incredibly powerless, and, like, you know, hounding others and trying to get them fired makes them feel like they have some power over something. Could talk about the fact that most Americans work in at-will workplaces where they can be fired over arbitrary nonsense and there's no labor union. Like, for all of those reasons, we do live in these we do live in a time where, whatever you want to call it, right? Cancel culture, call out culture, whatever, it is all over the place. And so the right, with their instinct for seizing on things and manipulating them and, you know, and using them to their advantage, makes a big deal about it. And oftentimes pushes their discourse about it in, like, weird and nonsensical directions that, like, every petty cultural complaint they have that has nothing to do with anything gets, you know, lumped in with that. See Mr. Potato Head. And then progressives and even the real left, because, you know, one of the big themes of the book is that liberals and the actual left, there is not as sharp a line in practice as you might like to believe, or I might like to believe sometimes. But, like, the progressive response is to, okay, sure, dunk on the right for, you know, their weird or stupid or hypocritical things they say about cancel culture. Fair enough as far as it goes. But then to either deny that the underlying phenomenon exists, or to say it does exist and it's good it's accountability. That this is a good thing. And either way, I think that the effect of all of that is to make it a winning issue for the Donald Trumps of the world. Because if you're frustrated by something that you can clearly see in front of you all the time, and there are people who are validating that, and there are people who are telling you that you're imagining it, then the second group of people is not going to be very convincing. I think we'd be way more convincing on this issue if we started talking about how we could actually do things that would solve it, like rebuilding the labor movement and ending at-will employment, and having maybe nationalizing the social media companies so they could make different decisions and respond to different incentives. Or maybe all that wouldn't solve it, but it would at least alleviate the problem. But instead, we just deny it or say that it's actually good, which is then particularly troubling to me because for a variety of reasons we could get into, far from being like an island away from this kind of behavior, which you'd think that the left would be because we're trying to build solidarity to change the material world. Oftentimes we're the most enthusiastic participants, because which I would argue has a lot to do with our particular homegrown pathologies, because the real left has been so far from the levers of real world power for so long that we've started to think of politics less as a project to change the material world than as a kind of symbolic performance of our moral commitment, our moral stand against the many very real injustices of the world. So we end up, instead of trying to draw as many people as possible in, we end up spending a lot of time guarding the sort of the gate, of the clubhouse, which is a lot of what the book ends up being about.
I agreed with a lot before I pivot over to Pascal. There's a lot of the book I agreed with, and I definitely agreed with that standpoint right there. We actually used to have this conversation, me and the band, a lot when we were on tour, about a certain gatekeeping pathology, and we started off with the conversation about Metallica, because when I was younger, that was an edgy band. If you liked Metallica, you were on the edges, the fringes, I would say, of a certain scene. I'm talking like the 80s, right? Now it's a mainstream thing and people hate it. So there's a certain guarding people have to certain artists and acts where it's like, well, I can't like it if you like it now. Now it's not cool. Said person isn't cool because you like it. And I see a extremely similar thing with the left. Oh, you're a tanky now? Oh, you say you're a socialist now? Well, then I have to grill you on what being a socialist is. I can't let you into my exclusive club. So I'll hush and let Pascal go.
Oh, my last question is, and Ben might disagree with me, and I can understand if he does, is that I don't believe that we have a left in America. I believe we have leftists, but there is no left. Because to me, to assume that we had a left, that means that we actually are able to implement or apply political power and pressure to the same degree as our oppositional force, which would be the right. And I would say that has not been the case, at least in what we call here at This Is Revolution, the 50-year counter-revolution, which is basically the period since the rise of Nixon and the counter-revolutionary politics since that time. So I appreciate that the Overton window has shifted, but I'd like you to define the left, as you talk about in your book, to argue that it exists. And how exactly are you arguing that it has a coherent, comprehensive ideological superstructure to even making these critiques to it in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Adolf Reed's formulation about how maybe there's a sense in which the left doesn't exist, but there's something that exists that maybe if we're very successful, if we get our act together, we will later say that was the left. So, in other words, we have something that, if you think a left is something that has some cohesion, some social power, is capable of intervening in meaningful ways in the world, then I totally get what somebody would mean when they say there just isn't one. But if we at least have something that aspires to be one, then I think that we need to start asking questions like, are the things that leftists are doing, if you want to talk that way, are the things that we're doing conducive to forming a real left that could have an impact on the world, or are they counterproductive to doing things that would that would have an impact in the world. Now, it could be that the situation is just so hopeless that it doesn't matter what we do, that there's no possibility that we could ever become a real left in that sense. And we're all just spinning our wheels, in which case, I don't know, have fun with it, I guess. It's maybe all of this is still this sort of weird pseudo-political entertainment, that we can keep on doing forever. But on the assumption that that leftists have a possibility of becoming something or contributing to something that could actually have an impact in the material world, then I think it's incumbent on us to start thinking about what we could do that makes that more likely to happen, and whether some of what we do actually makes it much less likely to happen, because in practice, we're not even really concerned with that. We don't think that we're going to have that kind of impact on the larger world. We just think that we're taking this kind of symbolic moral stand, in which case it makes sense to spend all of your time interrogating other people's symbolic moral stand. Are they really committed to the things that we're committed to? And that, if your purpose is just to guard the clubhouse, then that makes sense. It's like, yeah, you would kind of have this reaction like some people have, like Jason was saying, that it's like everybody else likes your favorite band now, that like, oh, too many people calling themselves socialists, got to shut that down. But if we think that we could actually become something real, then we need to start thinking about how to stop doing the things that I think are actively counterproductive to that are going to be extremely unappealing to the vast majority of people that we want to rope in.
Right. Now, I read the book, and there are many points you bring in that are worth touching on. But one of the main themes is cancel culture. But what I found particularly interesting about the book is that you kind of critique the sectarian posturing of various left tendencies that we have. One of them are what you call tankies, which maybe we would call pejorative, or Marxist-Leninists. The others, you talk about anarchists. And one of the things that I find interesting about the book is that the posture of the book assumes that the democratic socialist posture of the left is the actual correct and appropriate way to go about left politics. How does that distinguish one from anything else but the sectarian stuff that a Trotskyist or a tanky or, frankly, an anarchist would write if they wrote a book talking about why Dem socks are nothing but collaboratists with the Democratic Party who are going to become agents of imperialism anyway, and joining them is nothing but basically becoming a tool of the same machine we're trying to fight?
It's a long question.
It is a long question, but I'll see if I can. I'll see if I can answer it in ways that might be useful or might intersect with parts of what's being asked about there. So yeah, I do think that certain kinds of stances that people on the left take, my analysis would be, that they arise out of what I call the pathologies of powerlessness. That it has been so long since the left, or leftists, if you want, have been anywhere near the levers of real power. We've had this several decades long decline of the labor movement, which would be the social base of any kind of effective left. We had the collapse of even those like flawed and authoritarian, attempts at alternatives to capitalism, which demoralized a lot of people and gave them the sense that there was no alternative, to the status quo. And I think that all of that does lead to what I would see as this mentality of guarding the clubhouse, that, having politics that are more about the image that you want to have of yourself, what you want to project into the world, than a concrete attempt to change the world. And I think one of the ways that manifests is this, what I would see as a kind of performative radicalism, that that if you say, forget let's demilitarize the police and start investing a lot more resources into social programs that could alleviate some of the social ills that are otherwise solved in a carceral way. if instead of just saying that, you say, well, I want to abolish the police, even if it's a little unclear, as frankly it seems to me. I think most people who talk that way, it seems to me that they're a little unclear even in their own minds what that actually means. Maybe disagree, but that's how it reads to me. But it sounds like a much more radical, edgy stand against the status quo. If you say not, I want, a form of socialism that would extend the kind of democratic rights that have been achieved already into other spheres of life, by democratizing the economy. A lot of times to a lot of people, that sounds like, oh, you're talking about socialism light or something. If you say Comrade Stalin did nothing wrong, that sounds like a much sort of sharper stance against the injustices of the world. So yeah, my analysis would be, and like maybe tell me if this answers your question, but say, all right, how would somebody who was a Stalinist or an anarchist or anything else, how is this different from the book that they would write? Well, I think to some extent it would just be that they would have a different, analysis, because they would substantively disagree. And of course, there are a lot of things that I talk about in the book, not just with regards to tankies and neo-anarchists, but also with regard to identity politics, with regard to cancel culture, etc. There are lots of things that I criticize in the book that if you disagreed with me on the substance of them, right, you thought that, no, this was just a correct position to take, then I think the sort of further critique that I would make of that would just be irrelevant to you. You'd say, like, okay, look, maybe this does have certain disadvantages in reaching out to the great mass of people who share our material interests, but maybe it's just worth it because this is a correct position and it's an important position and it's one we've got to run with. And we've got to eat those disadvantages in order to take that correct stance. But if you do agree with me on the substantive politics of it and say that none of these things are very convincing on their own terms, then that further question arises: that why is it that they have such a foothold within the left or among leftists right now? That what's the itch that it's scratching for them, and then my analysis would be that that arises out of those pathologies of powerlessness. So I don't, I certainly don't claim to have all the right answers about what an effective left strategy would look like, or if there are things about the kind of democratic socialist left that that have emerged that are just fundamentally wrong. But I do think that those two flavors of performative radicalism are very unhelpful, right? And then I guess if look, if I'm wrong about that, I'm wrong, right? Like if it's if the sort of most basic political assumptions of the book are just misguided, right? Then fair enough, right? I mean, everything else comes down around it, but for the record, I don't think they are. So maybe we can fight about that.
No, this is a discussion. You're a guest. We're going to treat you like a guest. I'm not trying to say, oh, I disagree with your book. I mean, even if I did, I would, I tell you, I mean, I think there's a lot of the book that is good. But what I'm saying is that, one of the things that we try to do on This Is Revolution is to try to avoid the sectarian trap. My whole position on all of this, sock dems, trots, MLs, anarchists, none of them have the power to pop a grape, and the notion that any of them thinks they're better than someone else is a joke to me, quite frankly. I think it's ridiculous for anyone to think they have any kind of salience just because they won a couple of seats in an election and they've had a guy from Vermont call himself a socialist for 40 years. That doesn't make them any more superior than a guy who calls himself an anarchist, a trot, or an ML. Because frankly, I look at the reality of how much neoliberal capitalism is rooted in both flanks of capital in this country, and I'm like, the left, whatever you want to call it, and whatever ideology you might find interesting today, doesn't have the power to pop a grape. So I mean, that's kind of my position overall, but that's not particularly relevant to your book per se. I just find that anyone, and I found this a lot with the left, from various positions. I've seen it with tankies, I've seen it with MLs, I've seen it with trots, I've seen it with anarchists. Is that they all believe that they have the perfect lightning in the bottle to answer the question, sock dems, whatever. And my position has always been, again, none of you have the power to pop a grape. And that you're all this kind of circle jerking in fecklessness until you realize that because none of you are talking to poor and working class people in the spaces that they are, and most of us are basically petite bourgeois PMC types who are all posturing radicalism to some degree, then maybe we can get somewhere. Because for me, the biggest obstacle to the left is the class makeup of the contemporary left. And that the fact that it's a pretty alabaster pale complexion of people that are talking this talk and are totally divorced from the majority of people who are being ground to powder from this capitalist system. That's kind of a more salient reason to me as to why the left kind of fails.
Yeah, so I guess my question would be, I mean, look, we do have a difference on the first part, right? I think that I think that Bernie Sanders winning 22 states in 2016, coming closer in some ways in the early stages this time, having building the largest socialist organization since the Popular Front era. That this is I do think that these things are significant, at least as symptoms of possibility, that they have I think that those are more real symptoms of political possibility than anything that's happened in a long time, and I do think that we can coherently talk about it. I think that we can have some evidence of what sorts of things are going to be appealing or alienating to most of those people who are being ground into powder. I mean, I think that we can actually we have some relevant evidence about what most of those people think, and I think that we can say with confidence that certain things are counterproductive. That when 20, we have 20% of Black respondents in polls will say that they want police presence in their neighborhoods to be reduced, saying that you want to abolish the police and you can't for the life of you explain clearly what you want that to be replaced with, I think is politically unhelpful. For example, I feel pretty comfortable making that claim. Now, there is part of what you just said that I do strongly agree with, which is about the class composition question, because I think part of the problem, I don't think it's the only part of the problem, but I think it's part of the problem of, some of the trends that are being critiqued in the book, does emerge from the fact that most active leftists of, as you say, every ideological flavor in the United States right now are not people who discovered the left, if we're going to talk that way, because the shop steward at their workplace turn them on to socialism. Most people who are politically active leftists are the downwardly mobile children of the professional managerial class, or are members of it themselves, professionals whose professions are becoming more precarious and more proletarianized in some ways, which drives them to think that their material interests are more aligned with the left program, which is good, right? That should be welcomed as far as it goes. But one of the perils of it is that a lot of times people, and I'm not exempting myself, who come out of that background in one form or another, take with them this kind of human resources department sort of acculturation in how they interact with people, how they try to solve problems. And that I think contributes to a lot of the current pathologies of the left. I think that you see that all the time in the ways that a lot of intra-left conflicts play out, and I think that that's at least a not sole, not decisive maybe, but I think that that's an important contributing factor to the problem.
Let me be clear. I would not go as far to say that the rise of Sanders is insignificant, but I would argue that the rise of Sanders is not a product of Sanders or his coterie. It's a rise of the material political economy and the reality of the society we live in, making the capacity of people realizing that capitalism is failing. And if it were not for the 2008 crash, most of the people who are in the Sanders coterie right now will be cheering for Hillary Clinton being a two-term president.
Would you say? Would you guys both agree that the rise of Sanders does come out of Occupy?
I think Occupy contributed to it, although I also think that I guess I half agree with Pascal. I certainly don't think that Sanders would have happened if not for the 2008 crash. I'm certain of that, right? And that there is a sense in which you can say both that and Occupy before it were symptoms of changing attitudes because of that. But then I think you can also say, like, I think that Occupy never really had the potential. You know, it was interesting because it was an early symptom of those changes of consciousness, but I don't think it was ever anything that had the potential to become anything, because I don't think that sort of horizontalist, every finger snapping, consensus building a way of doing politics that really shunned any attempt to concretely take power because of this kind of quasi-anarchist ideology. I don't think that could have become anything. I think that, Sanders could not have happened without the 2008 crash. No doubt whatsoever about that. But also, I think that the fact that he was able to take advantage of that moment is because he was not spouting performatively radical slogans. He was speaking in a very clear and unadorned and convincing way about people's basic material needs.
He literally called his campaign a revolution. Talk about not being performatively radical. I mean, that's pretty performatively radical.
I mean, Panera says that it's doing the bread revolution. That's just American. I mean, they have a like everything in America calls itself a revolution. You know,
would you say, Pascal? Would you have to agree though that looking at Sanders' campaign in 2016, let's just go back to 2016, 2015. There were things he was talking about that we just didn't hear on the campaign trail.
Listen, I would be remiss if I did not admit that Sanders' campaign opened the Overton window for policy discussions that we did not have traditionally in American politics. I give him credit for that. I also know that I was not a Sanders supporter in 2016 because his socialism stopped at the water's edge and he had no challenge to American imperialism whatsoever. I've had people who worked on his campaign on foreign policy on this show admit that. So my larger problem that I have, particularly with his iteration of socialism, is that it's basically Keynesian welfare state capitalism that has no real challenge to the overall working of global capital in the world, and it's basically just FDR in the 21st century.
Well, bigger picture, and this goes to both of you guys. Bigger picture, do you think, though, that because of Sanders saying the word socialism, which, let's be honest, Barack Obama definitely deflected that title that he had for whatever reason for the majority of his presidency. He might have called himself a progressive here and there, but he never called himself a socialist. Bernie Sanders taking on that socialist title and not really being afraid of it has enabled so many people to start trying to figure out what socialism is and get involved into the left.
Again, I have been transparent several times that I believe I got into a major argument with certain factions of the left, even people who were my own co-writers of Black Agenda Report, because I said literally in 2016, I think the notion of making Sanders the enemy of the left because he doesn't fit our purity test is a mistake, and that we should take his candidacy as an opportunity to open the window and explain and explore socialism to a new group of people who have never seen it before. Many people did not take that advice, and in 2016 made him a worse enemy than Hillary. And these are people particularly who have been part of the left going back to the 60s, and I think that they were wrong. They were absolutely wrong. And I say that as someone who did not support Sanders in 2016. I am not trying to say that the Sanders reality was insignificant. I think Bernie Sanders I wrote a whole piece on my own blog saying that the most important political development in America since the rise of Reagan was Bernie Sanders, not Barack Obama. I stand by that without a doubt. But at the same time, one of the things that I find problematic about his coterie is that they seem to believe that they have found some kind of lightning in a bottle because the trust fund evaporated in 2008, and now they believe they're the epitome of socialism in the world, that they can lecture people who have politics that they find maybe impolite for their moment because they think they found the answer to that question. And I don't believe anyone on the left, myself included, necessarily has the answers to the question. We're all basically floating in a world of reactionary politics. We're trying to find a way to change the reality by seizing power, or some people believe deconstructing power. And the reason I say this is not because I'm not sympathetic to Ben's position. I see much of the logic of Ben's position, and I applaud Ben for putting it there. But what I'm saying is that Ben's position is a product of a politics of a certain faction that exists on the left. And I kind of have an issue with anyone in any faction believing that they are any more correct or incorrect than anyone else, since none of these factions at the contemporary moment have translated into any real world policy that has transformed anyone's life besides conversations.
Well, I mean, look, I think I suspect that you think that your positions on various issues are more correct than other people's positions. If you don't, I'll think it for you. I think some of what you think is more correct than some of what other people think on a variety of issues. I could rattle off that we agree with. I do agree that, especially in the 2016 campaign, foreign policy was the weekend of the Sanders Project. I mean, I think there were some good moments with regards to Kissinger and Cuba and other issues, but I mean, it wasn't the focus, and it was something that he often was manifestly uncomfortable talking about, especially then. I actually think he found his legs a little bit in 2020, but I don't expect that, like, the sort of, I mean, I think a lot of times people on the left exaggerate the continuity between the sort of more robust kind of social democracy a la Bernie and the kind of quarter social democratic politics that existed in the New Deal. I think that there is a real distinction there. I mean, a lot of New Deal programs were means tested. A lot of them were severely limited in ways that are very contrary to both the spirit and the kind of policy proposals that were made by Sanders. But I also don't think that, I mean, my position, and I mean, Pascal is right to say that, I mean, I definitely, I definitely come out of a certain faction, a certain sort of way of understanding the left. I mean, certainly, without being too self-indulgent about going through my own, history. I mean, I was pretty checked out of active involvement in left politics for a very long time. And I checked back in, because of some of these developments that struck me as signs of a potential for something real happening. But as far as what something real might, look like, I think that to get to a point where we could build up the kind of left where some of these other discussions would even matter, I do think that, under present conditions, I do think that you have to start with social democracy. I don't think you can end with social democracy. I think that if you end with social democracy, like Rosa Luxemburg said, you're just pushing the boulder up the hill, and the ruling class is pushing it back down again. I also think that some social democracy doesn't challenge the by itself, the fundamental institutions of the capitalist state. That I do think that, I mean, I think that in a hypothetical Sanders administration, that I do think that we would still need an anti-war movement. Let's put it that way, right? That they have that I agree with that. But I think that social democracy can, at its best, at its worst, it can be a road to nowhere. We've certainly seen that before historically. But I think at the best, it can bring things to a point where you reach a point of decision. Like I think maybe like Sweden in the 70s did, where you can either go beyond social democracy and have some sort of much more basic rupture with the status quo, with the basic institutions of the capitalist state. By the way, I'm certainly not going to sit here and pretend that I know what that could possibly look like in America in the 21st century. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't look like 1789 or 1917, but I don't know what it would look like. But I think that you could have either to maintain the gains that have already been made and stop that boulder from being rolled back down the hill. You have some sort of much more basic break with the status quo, or else you see some form of austerity and as Mark said, all the old shit, starting again. That's my, that's my perspective. So I don't know how fundamental a difference that is with Pascal or not. Like in some ways,
I actually, and I agree with you in that out of basic formation. I think anyone who believes that America is going to drop the hammer and sickle to become, the communist utopia where the workers have the proletarian dictator of the proletarian is going to happen, is living in a fantasy world. I get that as well. I also believe that anyone who thinks that we're going to be having multiple workers' councils governing society without a nation state is living in a fantasy as well. But I also believe anyone who thinks that we're on the brink of moving to social democracy when we have the whole right flank of capital in a reactionary right wing, some even would say fascistic state, are also delusional. But what I do believe is that if all 3 or 4 of those tendencies came together and agreed that realistically, we all know that at this particular iteration of time, the best thing we're talking about is reformism. We're not going to get social democracy tomorrow. We're going to get reforms. All right. So since we all realize at best we're going to get reforms, you and I know, we know enough about the left that there are some of us who on the left who get allergic by the concept of even saying we're going to get reforms. That's right. And I would tell them, you're ridiculous. You think you're going to get anything more. Since we all agree that the best we're going to get at this moment are reforms, the question is, what are the nature of those reforms going to be, and how can we collectively, as people trying to aspire to create a left, get those reforms? And I think, for me, that's a more helpful posture than the proliferation of the left circle jerk that like, oh, XYZ is right, he's wrong, he's dead, that we or normally do, that myself also does. I'm not accusing you of doing that, Ben. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I just don't think any of us are in a position to act like we have the answers to the question. I think that what we do know is that shit has to change. And the best that we can do is come together and find a way to put the pressure on the state to get the changes that make the society better for poor and working class people across the board.
Changing the subject just a little bit, we got a super chat from Bryce Adams. Thank you very much. Pascal, I'm just remembering as you're saying that, I'm remembering when Kanye West was yelling at Sway about not having the answers. That's all I could hear in my head as you were going off that last second. But did audiences become too sensitive and or woke to have comedians become complacent and lazy with their storytelling and jokes?
Yeah. So I do want to just really quickly say on the previous subject that I think I was pretty upfront in parts of what I just said about not having all the answers, but I think not having all the answers is compatible with knowing that there are certain specific things that parts of the left say and do that are actively counterproductive, that make it harder.
I think that's fair. I agree with that.
As far as comedy goes, I think that there is, for all the reasons we were talking about earlier, I think that there are just general trends in American American culture in general. I that tend to lead to a certain kind of strange moralism, right? Like that impacts all spheres of life. I mean, we just had 450 past contestants on Jeopardy sign a letter denouncing a current winner because he had made a gesture with 3 fingers for having won 3 games that people with online brain poisoning think has something to do with white supremacy.
Oh, like when Steph Curry does this for 3-pointers?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
And like that's something that I think I think that it's not something that I think could have happened in the 1990s. And again, I think that like social atomization, having the rise of social media, the sort of general hopelessness of living in this kind of neoliberal hellscape all contribute to that in various ways. I don't think that a plausible answer, just to directly answer the super chat, is just that comedy has gotten worse. Because whereas, like, yeah, lots of comedy is very bad, guys, it always has been, right? Like that's never not been true, right? Like there was never an era of comedy where tons of it didn't suck, and so I don't think that is it. I think that it's I think that the dynamics of the culture war right now are just a little bit different, than what they used to be. I mean, there's an essay I really like by Freddie DeBoer from 2017 called "Planet of Cops," where he talks about how feels like absolutely everybody, like left, right, center, people who only post about baseball, whatever, have sort of become cops. Like he's got all these great like lines about people, tapping their, metaphorical batons against the window of the car, says, oh, that new movie everybody likes, give me 3 hours and 700 words. I'll find you your convictions, that there is, I think that is a larger trend. And I think that kind of culture war, even though it's not the main focus of the book. I mean, I'm primarily interested in how all this impacts the left because that's what I care about. But in that opening chapter where I do talk about the comedy wars, what I say is that like this kind of culture war, and this isn't just true of comedy. We can say this about culture in general, right? Culture war is bad for culture, and it's bad for culture in a couple of ways. One is that people who are engaged in moralistic policing just make for like bad and tone deaf cultural critics, because they want to like sort everything into the good basket or the bad basket, and they end up flattening a lot of distinctions. And also because the effect of it, like I quote the Nigerian British Marxist thinker, cultural critic Ralph Leonard, who had a good essay on this. He has, yeah, exactly. Excuse me, sir. Have you been microaggressive this evening? Like I agree with what Leonard says in there. The effect of the culture war on culture is incredibly dumb on all sides, right? Like because you get like in the comedy example, you get this like incredibly tedious woke comedy that's designed to elicit less laughter than it's the word clapter. Right. It's like, oh, you're so right.
Yeah.
You're so right.
Yeah.
Right. And on the other side, you get equally tedious anti-woke comedy where like even good albums, you have to suffer through 10 minutes of stale, repetitive stuff about how nobody can tell a joke anymore to even get to the good stuff. And the question I would ask that I ask in the chapter is a little bit different, which is like, why does anybody care about the politics of comedians in the first place? And I think that has to do with the way that a certain strand of American progressivism, and I know we talked about this earlier, like people who got super mad at the title of the book. Most people were mad about it because like I use the word canceling in a way that suggests that canceling's a bad thing. That was like 95% of people who got mad about it. But like the better 5% of criticism were people like saying, oh, cancel comedians. So you mean like libs? Like, why are you talking about the left? That's just liberal stuff. And I think that's a fair criticism to a point. But I also think that, again, a big theme of the book is that the distinction is not always a sharp one in practice. Like all of the stupidities of American liberalism tend to infect the left as well. And I think that there's the way that comedy, other forms of culture play in the liberal imagination. It's like as if they have this tremendous emancipatory potential that's like squandered if somebody has the wrong politics.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
Because when sometimes people will hit me up about musicians and they'll be like, well, so and so has bad politics, and I'm like, yeah, like they're a musician. They don't give a shit about who's president. They don't even give a shit about who's the city council. They don't give a shit about anything. A lot of the ones I know give a shit about playing shows and loose women and dope. So you know what I mean? Like, so you really want to hear what they have to say about the inner workings of fucking Congress?
Yeah, right.
And if you've been in a room with comedians for a long time, the last thing most of them are talking about is politics.
Yeah, I mean it's like the idea is like that the comedian is this person who can, be a canary in the coal mine. They can speak truth to power, and above and beyond all the other ways that's dumb. I think it's also just like I think that this idea that like political change is about speaking truth to power is just weird to start out with, right? I mean, power knows the truth. That's not the problem, right?
I love that part in the book where you say that.
Yeah, right. That that's like, it's like the comedian's supposed to be like the court jester who can tell the king the peasants are starving. The king wouldn't stay king for very long if he cared that the peasants were starving.
I actually think it's more valuable to speak truth to the powerless than the ones who have power, because they're the ones who don't.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You want to stop the peasants from starving, organize the peasants themselves into a movement for land reform. Like that might actually do something. The powerless are the ones who need to hear the truth. The powerful, by and large, know the truth. I mean, that's like the sort of old thing about the like socialists who'd subscribe to the Wall Street Journal because you actually got, honest class analysis there, because it was written for them.
But Ben, I don't want you to feel that I was out here with machetes blazing, trying to chop your head off about the book. I thought the book was very valuable. It was very important. But I have, and I'll be very transparent, I have a serious ambition about me. I hate left sectarianism, man. I'm not a fan of anyone on the left believing that their ice is colder. Because to me, I'm like, I live in a working class neighborhood surrounded by black people. They don't give a damn about the MLs, the Trots, or the sock dams, frankly. All they know is like these are just a bunch of white folk talking shit that I don't care about. And these are the people who need left politics more than anyone else. So I don't want you to think you're a great fan of the show, and I love talking to you, and I love that you've been very open to us as well. But I have a very allergic reaction to left sectarianism of any type, because I think that is the height of the biggest problem on the left, is that there is this kind of sectarianism, and that everyone on the left makes it a hyper intellectual project requiring a PhD education to let working class people know that capitalism is screwing you over. And to me, in terms of the hierarchies of what stops the left from being effective, cancel culture is not as high as a lot of those other really clear, transparent things, which would actually be just as easy to fix as cancel culture, quite frankly, in my opinion.
So what would be what would be an example of something that because I don't, I mean, I don't want to claim to have particularly cold ice cubes. I do think that there are some particular ice cubes that a lot of people on the left want to have us put in our drinks. They're like boiling, but
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree.
But I think, but I am curious, right? Because it's like, because I was sort of following along with everything you said until the very end. I understand saying that there are like tons of structural things that are largely outside of our hands. that that stop that prevent left breakthroughs from happening. The the long-term decline of the labor movement, the decline of mass association in general, under neoliberalism, a lot of other things, and those, of course, are incredibly difficult to overcome. And I think that that, like, my claim, right, I think would just be that there's lots of stuff that I'm not going to pretend to have the answers to as far as obstacles that we need to overcome to have like a real mass left. But I think there are some specific things that like are somewhat in our power to control. And so that's why I want to talk about them. I want to at least stop the own goals. But I think that you were suggesting that at the very end there that there's like lots of other stuff that that would be just as easy to fix. And yeah, I mean, I guess I want to I always respect what you have to say about this stuff. So I want to hear. I mean, if you've got some answers here, I am nothing but ears.
I've got one thing that's very easy to fix. Go talk to Black and Latino working class people. Where is the left outreach in the Black church? Where is the left outreach at HBCUs? Where is the left outreach in the political spaces where Black and Latino people are?
And I was going to say, save that for the bonus half, but you didn't read what I wrote.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Oh. Yeah. All right. Well, do better, Pascal.
I was like, this motherfucker ain't gonna see what I wrote. I was trying to be smooth and slick about that shit. LME, why are you bringing up old shit? We did bring that up. That was actually rather funny. I'm not gonna lie. That was pretty hilarious.
No, I mean, serious question. I know we're at the hour, but listen, if we can agree that we will not have a left without Black and brown people in this country, particularly since we know that Black politics will neutralize left politics if it is not punctured, then why is it not the primary function of the left is to find a way to penetrate Black politics to make those politics effective to Black, poor, and working class people?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, I think that there's a whole discussion to be had, like like in a really concrete way, about like some of the greatest failures of the left in the last like year and a half have like, I mean, yeah, South Carolina in 2020 and in a different way, right? But I think not unrelated to some of what you're saying, Bessemer, just now, that there is definitely a failure of outreach there, and I mean that is something. I mean that's for sure something like we have to we have to be to be better at. I think that like maybe some of that's like circular because the kind of people
Ben, history, American history, left history. Name me a time in American politics where there has not been a strong left minus strong Black participation. Has there ever been one in American history?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like, I guess maybe, yeah. I mean, like, I have a I mean, I don't know what counts as a strong left, right? Like, like, well, I think
enough to force concessions for fear of repercussions, or require massive state neutralization.
Yeah, probably not, right? I mean, like, because even the sort of industrial, labor struggles in the North, still had substantial, Black participation. So no, probably not.
Before we need to finish this on the bonus, Ben, can we snag you for a little bit longer? Or do you have husband shit to do?
No, I'm good. You can. I will warn you that we said at the top that I had been. I was just coming back from being on the plane for the first time since the pandemic, and
that's a long flight for you.
And I had like a red eye, so all of which is just to say, I'll go on the post game, but I'm not going to promise I'm going to be coherent.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you. So I won't waste any time. Thank you very much. His book is called Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. I actually put links in the description to purchase the book from Red Emma's. So wherever you're watching the show, there is a link in the description to the book. He also has a show. I put a link in the description of that as well. I'm sure you guys are well aware of it. Give them an argument. Pascal and I were on there. He was nice enough to have me on recently. Go ahead.
Before we go to the post game, this is a little self-indulgent, but can I answer one quick quad chat question?
Sure.
Okay. Because I do realize this is pretty out of character. Somebody asked if I was wearing a Kabbalah string bracelet, which is a good eye. The short answer is no. I am wearing something that is somewhat along those lines. It's not that exactly. I would not normally wear it. I'm my own views on spirituality and all of that are sort of tediously predictable for given who I am and what I think. I'm a materialist atheist kind of guy, but somebody who recently lost someone who matters to me made me this thing, and I feel weird about not wearing it. So that's the.
I feel you on that.
So anyway, but enough. Yeah, so I didn't want to interrupt your flow as you were.
No. We're exiting out. If you guys are patrons, you know the deal. The link is already up. We'll be there in a few minutes. If you're not a patron, go be a patron. It's inexpensive and it's fun, and you get to hear Pascal yell more. If that's what you guys like. He yells more in the bonus half, and depending on who's on the show, we say the language is colorful. Colorful people with colorful language.
Shout out to Janice Graham in the chat, by the way.
So thank you guys for checking out the show, and we are out.